Collaboration, communication, and trust. Those are the first three items that I always start at. Don't have fear. Don't be scared to approach something that you've never touched before. If you have any negative thoughts, you don't go into it with an open mind, you're not going to be successful in the end.
Keeping businesses thriving, compliance and safe, forecasting strategy, it's all on our mind. It's time payroll took its place in the boardroom to shine.
What does global payroll without borders actually look like in real life? It's one platform handling every country you operate in. Real-time insights, automated tax logic, and zero handoffs between HR, IT, finance, or local vendors. That's exactly what happens when payroll runs on Deal's own global infrastructure. It's faster, it's cleaner, and built for teams that need accuracy every single time. See it for yourself at deel.com/nickday. Hello and welcome back to the Payroll podcast. Now, some payroll leaders build systems, others build teams, but my guest today builds something far more powerful. She builds people. And for over 20 years, today's guest has been transforming payroll teams across the US and globally, uniting cultures, developing high-trust organizations, and mentoring professionals at every stage of their payroll journey. She's the leader people call when they need empathy, clarity, or sometimes even courage, and especially when they need a new standard of excellence. Today, we're diving into the origin story, the superpowers, and the next chapter of a payroll leader who believes in trust, compassion, and most importantly, lifting others higher. So welcome. If you're new to the show, please do remember to click subscribe and follow. Most importantly, if you can leave us a review, that would be amazing. And please do share this episode with your payroll colleagues and friends, and we can really raise the profile of payroll globally. If you're new to the show, of course, I am your host. My name is Nick Day. I'm the CEO at JGA Recruitment. We are a specialist payroll recruitment agency. But most importantly, the purpose of this show is to raise the profile, to amplify the message that payroll has a place, and it's really, really important within business. And today I'm joined by a leader whose career has been built not just on skill, but on heart. My guest is Wendy Uutala. I met Wendy recently for dinner over in Texas. We had a fantastic time, and I got to know Wendy better, and I realized very quickly that she is a global payroll professional who is very much known for building aligned, efficient teams across borders, across cultures and technologies as well. She has a reputation for creating high-trust environments, for mentoring both new and seasoned payroll professionals, and for blending technical expertise with genuine compassion. I promise you all listeners, this is going to come through in spades as we get into this interview. We're going to be exploring her journey, her philosophy, and her superpowers, and what's coming next as we step deeper into mentoring and indeed public speaking. And this indeed is her first podcast. So welcome, Wendy, to the Payroll podcast. How are you feeling?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Really excited to see you again. I know this time it's virtually rather than in person, but delighted to have you here. I know it's been an invite I sent out a while ago, and I'm really stoked we've made it happen. First question I ask all of my guests, though, of course, is this: what does the word payroll mean to you?
Payroll means that there are going to be awesome times, troublesome times throughout your career. You have to run with it sometimes, and sometimes it makes it easier. And it depends on your team and making sure that they are strong and confident and come to me, communicate. Those are the biggest items that make payroll successful and paying people timely and accurately.
And I think I sort of lent towards that idea of how important the team is in your career and how you really believe in building your teams up. But let's take it back a little bit further. Let's start at the beginning. What were some of the early experiences in payroll that left a really lasting impact on you, the moments that have kind of shaped how you lead today?
I would say that first off, I was starting out in payroll at a very young age as a single mom. And so there was a lot of challenges with that, but I took it as a growth opportunity. I didn't have the traditional formal education. So I relied highly on, hands-on experience and making sure that I continue to grow and really get exposure to everything in payroll. You start out small, and I always wanted to go to, okay, what's next? What am I missing? What's the full picture? Whether I do it or not, it's just truly the understanding of every aspect of payroll, which there's so many facets. It's,
So many.
yeah, there's not just one thing, and that's really what really encouraged me throughout my career and the growth, and just never giving up, and just that perseverance, to keep going. And, just, I love it. I fell in love with it. It's crazy how I even got into payroll. Graduated high school early at 16, walked into as a payroll host, not a payroll, sorry, excuse me, a hostess position. And just within a few months was a situation where they lost their payroll manager, and they just came out and said, who wants to do payroll? And I raised my hand, not knowing that was going to be my career for the rest of my life. So there's a saying, payroll chooses you. You don't choose payroll, at least back in the day.
Well, I think you mentioned a word in there which I just want to pick up on, because you've made it right to the top of the payroll tree, right? You're a director of payroll services now. You've worked in different industries, large teams. But you said at the start of that response that you felt you found your career that you wanted to grow in. What was it that gave you that insight? Because we often, when we start out, particularly when we're young, we can go through different industries, different jobs. It's very rare we find an industry we go, actually, you know what? This is the one for me that I think gives me that career growth opportunity. And the reason I'm picking up on that is we need more people to see that opportunity, particularly for school leavers. We need to get more people into this wonderful profession, but they don't always see it the same way. So I wondered what it was for you that said, you know what, I can do this.
It was, a few years of experience, and it got to a point where I was like, okay, what's next? And I had a great opportunity with a retail company, and I was assigned to clean up their taxes and to bring it in-house. And, yes, I knew tax and, on a smaller scale, but this was a very large company, tens of thousands of people all over the United States. And it was fun to learn all the rules and regulations and requirements that I had to audit and fix and amend and then bring in-house and automate through MasterTax. And I was eventually a speaker for MasterTax when they were private. And it was a lot of fun. That's when I really just started falling in love with it, and really having that confidence that I am an expert in the field. Hiring a team to support me, it was an extreme opportunity that I had, and continue to grow from there. I'm like, okay, what's next? And so I also managed a couple payrolls because they had 9 on top of tax, and being able to start my career in mentoring and learning myself as I went.
I want to jump into the mentoring thing in just a minute. You said something, God, every time you say something, I think I get inspiration. And you said something, which I'm going to jump into in just a moment. But just for our international audience, processing payroll across the US is a lot more complex than it sounds, because every single state has its own set of rules and regulations and compliance. It's almost like processing a global payroll for multiple countries. And of course, you've worked across different countries, cultures, technologies. And I do want to ask you in a minute to look back across some of those moments to see what the turning points were. But what I loved about what you just mentioned, and what really rang true for me, was you said, I realized I was an expert in payroll. Now, as you know, I work as a coach as well. And a lot of the struggles I think we have in this profession in trying to amplify it and trying to get the people to the surface to really speak is there's a bit of imposter syndrome in this industry where people don't always recognize that they're experts in what they do. And maybe that's because other functions often don't recognize it in the same way. It's underappreciated a lot of the time. But actually, it's such a powerful thing for me as a host to hear one of my guests say, I am an absolute expert. I'm an expert in this field. And I think more people need to own that kind of sentence, that statement. How does it make you feel now? Because you said you had to get to that point where you suddenly realized that you were. Has it changed how you approach payroll? Has it changed how you mentor your teams now that you have that inner belief?
Oh, absolutely. Game changer. And it starts with confidence and that willingness to grow. Not everybody has that, and you identify that with your teams, but individually as well. You identify that I'm an expert in this aspect of payroll. And every company is different. You can't
Sure.
mirror one from another. And I've worked in so many industries. I think I've checked most of them off now. And it really just drives you to go, okay, well, what's different about this one? What's different about this company? And pivoting, it's never a straight line. You're constantly pivoting. And, after, I became to a point where I wanted to move on with my career and I knew the payroll manager wasn't leaving. I literally stepped back and was like, you know what? I'm ready to be a payroll manager, and literally found an amazing opportunity, which was my first global experience. And I'm one of those individuals that go in and evaluate, obviously. And if I've never done it, I will teach myself. I will Google. I will take training classes. I will collaborate with colleagues that do have experience in those fields. And just really, sometimes it's a work in progress. Sometimes you fail, you learn how, to overcome those failures and just continuously improve. And that also shows leadership for others, that whether they're reporting to you or not, they see it and it encourages them, motivates them, and they want to be more involved. And that taught me early on that I had the leadership skills, even though I hadn't dove too deep into it, supervisor first, then right into payroll management. So it was a learning experience, and it continues to grow throughout my career, but I am very confident in how to approach it now.
Fantastic. I like the idea that, well, something I've heard someone said to me is the best leaders are always apprentices, i.e. they're always learning. The minute we think we don't need to learn anything anymore is probably the time that our leadership skills start to deteriorate, because you never have all the answers. I think you gave a really good example of that. So when you look back at the key moments or challenges that you've had, as you said, you've moved not just from huge size payrolls. And by the way, for our UK listeners, we're talking tens of thousands of employees. Here in the UK, if you have up to 10,000 employees, that is a huge payroll. In the US, it's a whole different ballgame. But you've worked across different cultures, different countries, different technologies and tech stacks. What have been the key moments that have, I guess, really influenced your evolution as a payroll leader?
Collaboration, communication, and trust. Those are the first three items that I always start at. Once you dive deep with your team, no matter what company you're with, you recognize who could be leaders, are eager to learn. And once you build that trust and encouragement, and it's pretty seamless at that point. There's some individuals that they're happy where they're at. They're not looking for change or growth. They have other things in their life that are more important or focusing on. And then there's others that, have been in the position for years and never had the leadership to even be encouraged to ask. They always felt like they were on their own. And I know what that feels like from my earlier career and being so young, getting into it, and people taking me seriously. And so, one of the things I go in as a leader is really just listen and build that trust. And it's really important, the listening, so they can actually, whether it's a personal thing or it's, related to work themselves, they're stuck. Their confidence is lower than it should be because they haven't been given those opportunities. They were never formally trained. There's all circumstances. I mean, it's not a one-stop shop, so to speak, and the way you have to approach it. And so, different personalities, cultures, how can we build the team, but not only as we build the team, make sure that we collaborate as a team. Because not only am I going to mentor and develop their skills and assist hands-on when needed, I jump in. My team, I've had so many comments throughout my career, like, I've never met a manager that jumps in and helps. That's me in a nutshell. I will never step away from my team, but I do give them trust and guidance and just say, hey, if you need me, reach out. We'll figure it out together, whether it's a team, individually. And it just makes such a big difference. And that's where the trust grows because they know you're there for them.
Yeah, it's funny. I had Stephen M. R. Covey on the show a couple of times actually over the years since we launched this podcast. And obviously he's written best-selling books, selling millions of copies. And the last book he talked about on the show was Trust and Inspire. And he said, you can't be a great leader. You can't build great teams unless you have that element of trust. And when you've built that trust, then the inspiration comes. It's a really good episode. If you haven't checked it out, please look at the back catalogue. But it's a really good episode with Stephen Covey. But I think it's interesting from a payroll perspective because trust is a double-edged thing in payroll. We need to be able to get our teams to trust us, build trust in order to have a great team and build those teams. But also we handle and are responsible for so much trust in what we do. That pay slip, that's the bit that is so important to the employee. If we get that wrong, it breaks trust. And then we have retention problems and all the things that come with it. So we're also responsible for so much trust, not just within our teams, but actually within the work that we do. And I think that pay slip is often, I guess, overlooked or underappreciated again, because that's the one thing. It's the reason we go to work. It's the thing that I'm earning money for to pay for my school fees or my health insurance or whatever it is. Like if we break that down, suddenly that security is taken away from us and trust folds away. Payroll's the one that's held responsible. So I think trust is one of the most important words in this profession. I don't think it's used enough. And I think we need to really build that up. And I know from your perspective, I like the idea of having a zone of genius or a superpower, and yours is very much in building domestic and global teams. Global is different though, isn't it? And I think for a lot of people listening to this, they may only have a domestic payroll now, US, UK, wherever it might be, but it's a good chance in the future that domestic payroll could become global because we're in a world now of globalization. You can hire from anywhere in the world. Tell me a little bit about that transition for you. How did you find moving from domestic, maybe multi-state, into a global type of payroll operation? And how did you lead those teams?
Oh, it's actually a funny story. I actually took a year off and, my husband was like, oh, it's a really bad time right now. It was really bad in the US for employment. And I was like, I'm not too worried about it. Within 24 hours, I was called in for an interview and hired on the spot. Now, did I know what I was getting into? No, but I knew I could do it because that's just who I am. I go in, I figure it out, and I collaborate with, people that I know, but mainly I just take the ball and run with it. And my first experience, true experience on global payroll was when I was working for a engineering company, and they were very large, very international. They were going into South America. And I had the opportunity to create from scratch how to even implement shadow and split payrolls with Colombia, with Brazil, going there, interviewing, hiring the teams, finding the third party, because compliance regulations, there is, or at least at the time, it's getting better now with technology. But at the time, you always had to have a third party. Obviously you have US, Canada, like Mexico, a couple other things that you can use a software for that is not going to require multiple. But in certain countries, there's no avoidance. You have to truly find the right company to support and then have the team to manage it and make sure that it's running properly. I managed that team abroad. And just visited them here and there. And, who doesn't love that? A little personal time by traveling and seeing new things. And, that also made it fun and wanted me to continue that journey. I can't say that one experience made me fall in love with global payroll and compliance and benefits and regulations and the different taxations. And, that's where that shadow and split payrolls are really intense, and making sure that you're not going to get caught with missing something, because it can just be astronomical as far as the results and damages and audits. And another thing that I learned is the international banking. Colombia required you to, pay the employee 100% in their currency. And then they have the option to transfer it to whatever country's personal bank they wanted to. You're talking about exchange rates. You're talking about just, I even had a circumstance, it was crazy, where, you have individuals, especially in Texas, that have the same name, and the government has them flagged. Not necessarily the person we're trying to pay, but someone with that name. And then I had to prove that that person is that person so they could get their money. And you deal with, situations like that, and you have to pivot, you have to communicate, you have to bring everybody involved that you need to make sure that person is paid. But sometimes it's even the government that is blocking their payment. It's not just, we sent it late. it's quite interesting.
I get the sense you love a challenge, Wendy. As you said right at the start of that response, I backed myself, got the job, 24 hours. Here we go, global payroll, bring it on. But obviously, there's a cultural shift. And I know there's shifts even within the States, huge countries. So, paying someone in Texas can be very different to paying someone in New York, for example, and there's cultural differences. But obviously they're magnified when we deal with global payroll. And one thing I found really interesting from doing this show is actually sometimes you can get a feel for how the country is even run through the way that people are paid. You can get a feel for the level of employment rights, for the type of benefits they get. And it kind of gives you, I guess, a bit of a narrative on how you think that country is run and how the people live their lives. And it is very, very different. So obviously it's something you really enjoyed getting to grips with and learning. How did you overcome or how even get to grips with some of the cultural shifts in paying employees in different countries, dealing with governments in different countries? Because people do things, even with the UK, we speak the same language, but we still do things very differently to the US.
Oh, absolutely. I went in with an open mind, with a positive attitude. I want to lead by example. I don't want people to be fearful. I want to pull that fear from them. And so going into different cultures in different countries, I always make sure that I sit there, I listen, and I really give them the opportunity to learn them, to learn from them, to their personalities. I mean, obviously from one to another, it could be totally different. And, the level of what you're speaking of, you don't want to feel, make someone feel, I should say, that they're not on the level that you even need. Because, I tell this to many people, I'm not necessarily looking for experts. I'm looking for someone that is willing to listen and grow, whether they're green or seasoned. It doesn't really matter as long as they have the personality and the drive to learn. And so regardless of what culture I go into, I always approach it that way, because learning and listening to them, I get more of an idea of their culture and their expectations and what they do or do not like from their experiences in the past. And I want to make that better. I want to make sure they understand that is not the way I manage, right? So I have to sell myself too. So, cultures, I love learning cultures and the food and the laws and the rules and the different concepts that the countries do for, the individuals that live there. Everybody is in a different situation as far as benefits of, extra per diem, meals, all these other things. And they're not necessarily a nice have, they're a requirement. And it's, something from the US where I truly appreciate that, hearing that countries give extra attention to their employees. I think it's huge.
Yeah, and I think it really opens up our eyes to how other countries are run and how people live their lives. I think it's so interesting. And obviously, you've done a great job of building really high performance teams. Give us a bit of an insight into some of the sizes of the teams you've managed, perhaps how many countries across how many countries, things like that. And once we've got a bit of a flavour, it'd be wonderful if you could share maybe your top tips for building trust quickly, for navigating cultural expectations, or just because even leading teams is different when you're leading them in an office to when you're leading people remotely. So I'm sure there's some tips there that I'd like to dive into.
Um, yes, I mean it's just leading people based off of whether it's on Teams or in person, or you hold a dinner or a luncheon or just a full day of topics that each individual can bring to the table, and everybody can develop and learn from those experiences. And that's how I approach it for all countries, because not everybody has the knowledge for every aspect of payroll. I
Right.
have I have managed teams of 2 up to teams of 20, 25, 30 in some circumstances between the US and any other country that we are in. I work for a staffing company, for example, that is based out of London. And so my boss was out of Ireland, and it was very interesting. I, met with him in person only twice, but I do have the opportunities to meet the teams more, and just really have those collaborations. And within those teams, in the countries that I'm working with, I always make sure that they also have leadership as part of their structure. So if I'm not available, they always have someone to go to, and they do not feel alone. So, you have the structure to build as a team to make everybody successful and the system to run properly. And if something is wrong, fix it, learn from it. Let's collaborate and develop how we can assure that that doesn't happen again, kind of thing. A lot of people think, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. This is bad. I make sure that any leadership that reports to me, or, I convey and work with these individuals for their growth and learning, don't fear. Unfortunately, people have had management in the past, including me. That's how I learned of my management style. Like, this is not going to work,
Yeah.
and you really just, you just see that in their face alone. They don't even have to say anything. That relief of just, okay, I can relax and take a step back and trust that everything's going to be okay, and I'm going to be even better for this. So it doesn't matter if you have a team of 2 or a team of 20. It's the same way to approach it, and the same way to make sure that everybody feels like a team, no matter where you work, and can rely on each other, not only management.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I like the idea that you said earlier on, actually, one of your earlier responses, but you re-emphasized it then, that you take their fears away. And for those that are new to or listen to the show regularly, you'll know I'm really passionate about the psychology of fear. And I often think that our potential lives on the other side of it. And yet so many people in payroll in particular, they run their roles in almost like an invisible way. We know if we don't hear from anyone, we're doing a good job. But invisibility doesn't build influence. So we need to get better at speaking up and making ourselves visible in slightly different ways, because that really amplifies how we can have an impact in our organizations, how we move it from cost center to value driver and these kind of things. I love the idea of taking those fears away, because that allows cultures to become unmuted. It allows people to come to you with confidence and say, hey, I've seen this, I think there's a problem. It may be my error, it may not be, but we need to get this fixed, rather than sort of burying things under the carpet. And I think I think it's an amazing way to lead. I know your key kind of words you mentioned earlier were trust, compassion, and encouragement. Attention, payroll leaders. If you're listening to this, you already know that payroll has never been more complex. Compliance risks are rising, skilled talent is scarce, and getting it wrong can cost your business way more than just money. It can cost you trust, retention, and of course, brand reputation. I'm Nick Day, host of this show and also CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, specialist global payroll recruiters. Here at JGA, we're so passionate about payroll, we've even turned it into music. Don't believe us? Head to your favorite audio platform and search for Payroll Powers the World, and you can quite literally join us in song about how we believe payroll deserves its moment in the boardroom to shine. At JGA, we'd like to think our passion shines through to our recruitment results as well. With a 97% retention rate and an average 19-day job brief to hire success rate, we work fast, we work strategically, and we work with purpose to connect you to the hidden payroll talent that job ads and direct search methods will simply never reach. So if you're hiring or indeed planning to hire, why not partner with the experts that are shaping the future of payroll? Partner with jgarecruitment.com today, or better yet, drop me a message directly, and together we can make sure your next payroll hire is your best one yet. How you've said that you've worked for those different leaders. So how did that leadership philosophy for you develop? And why is it working so well in payroll? Because you've been very clear on the three things that are really important to you. And it sounds like they've evolved over time.
I've had a couple of amazing mentors throughout my career, and those took my heart. And I took what I learned from them and I developed my own management style on what I think drives success and the leadership for the team. And the team identifies that fairly quickly in responses of when I walk in the door. Obviously, they're like, oh, I don't know. Is this going to work? What's her personality? What's her management style? And I really just take that out within the first few weeks. So they're like, oh, now I see, and I'm not going to leave. And, this is going to work. And I'm excited because she is going to be supportive and there for me and allow me to grow. And one thing that I do is when someone does something great, and whether they're asked or not, I make sure to tell them thank you. I want to make sure that they feel that they are appreciated and not just doing their one job and it's really quiet. So no one questions them. No one approaches them with further growth because, it's working out where they're at. I challenge my team constantly through coaching individual as a team that it's very important to just stop sometimes what you're doing and shadow me. See what your other opportunities can be. What are you interested in? Where do you want to start? And if they aren't sure, I'll pick. But, but the fact that they're eager, it's just sometimes obviously when people step out of their shell, they're not quite sure. And why would they be? Because they've never had any experience or exposure to it. So I am definitely one of those leaders that really challenge my team. And usually the response is they're excited and they're like, okay, when are we going to meet? It's literally that awesome. And, if they're come back and, just like a lot of people in payroll, I'm just too busy. I don't have the bandwidth. Yeah. And then they feel discouraged. And so what I do is say, okay, well, I'm going to take on one of your payrolls this week so you can work on this. I give them the opportunities if they don't have it. What does it take? I'm one of those managers that I'll do anything to make sure that my team is successful. My team comes first because they are the building block of the entire company, getting paid, the communication, the coordination between all the departments. We touch all the departments. We're not just payroll. And we report to HR, we report to finance. They don't know what we're doing. And like you said, if there's no issues, it's quiet, they're good, and so I always also approach when my team is, overwhelmed and, an error happened, or something was overlooked. a process wasn't efficient enough because a gap wasn't identified. It's an anomaly, right? I'm the type of also the manager that takes on the responsibility of expressing to senior leadership that it was something that I missed, not something my team missed. So I always give them that extra just
It,
encouragement
it
that
reminds me of, it
alone.
reminds me of, I coached the Exmouth Town under 12s soccer team, football team. And obviously they're all kids. And football, soccer, most sports, they're usually decided on mistakes. People make mistakes all the time. And one of the things that I try and teach the kids when I'm coaching them is, don't worry about the mistake. It's not the mistake that's going to define the result. It's how you react to it. Where do you show up post mistake? Where do you have the attitude to go, okay, and we pull together? Can you be a teammate to the other person that's made the mistake? Can you pick them up as well? And I think it's absolutely true. I think you have well, I'm sure you know it, but you have a very natural coaching way of leadership. And I think coaching is the future of leadership anyway, in the way that we manage our teams. It's listening and empowering our teams by, you've used listening a few times as a word, but asking them questions. How would you solve that problem? That's what gives them empowerment. And actually, just by saying the simple thank you, that enables your teams to know that they're being seen. Because if they're not hearing anything from anyone else because it's accurate, it lets them know that actually my work here is valued because Wendy has spotted it and she said thank you. If you said nothing at all, we go in every day wondering whether we're doing a good job. And it allows people to feel, yeah, I've been seen by Wendy, and that's empowering as well. So it's a really lovely way of, you have a very natural coaching style. And I know you've mentioned mentorship a few times. It sounds like mentorship is right at the heart of the work that you do. Not everyone's familiar with what mentorship is, but it's obviously central to the way that you operate. So how do you form those authentic, personable relationships that help not just new professionals? People think mentoring is only for new professionals, but it's not. I have a coach that I still work with now. It can be for seasoned professionals, and actually some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world, Bill Gates, others, they have coaches and mentors that they work with as well. The best tennis players in the world have coaches. So I think there's sometimes a misconception that we have to be new to have a mentor or a coach. But tell us a little bit about your mentorship approach and how you've kind of dived into that.
Definitely, again, starting so young, have managed a team of seasoned, unseasoned, age difference, right? So you got to still have that respect to be taken seriously. And then once you get there, that's where that mentorship leads to challenging your team, giving them an opportunity to try it first. Don't lead them. Don't give them the answers, but mentor them that you have this. I know you have the ability. Let me give you some tools and you try it. And then we will collaborate and I will give you insight where you can improve or that you nailed it, and that really gives that mentorship where I'm helping them grow. I'm kind of making them being challenged, which a lot of people haven't been. And so giving them those opportunities and not just teaching them and handing it to them, they're not going to learn that way. They're going to learn like, okay, this is how I approached it, but I missed this step. Or it goes the other way. They approached it differently that I wouldn't have thought of. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I love it. That's when I get the chills and I get a little giddy, so to speak, because, it's just exciting. It makes it fun. It makes it to where you want to go in the next day and finish where you ended, or stay up all night to finish because you can't stop. It just depends. Payroll people are a little different, and being able to handle the hours, the stress, working through the holidays, when you have family members and babies and, things like that. And that's where I really just make sure that it's okay to take off for your family. It's okay to take a break. Hey, I need to take a half day off. I'll start back tomorrow. I'm one of those leaders that it's very important for me to support their needs just as much them supporting mine. It goes both ways. And so when I
Yeah.
mentor, to me, mentoring is the individual, but it's also feedback from me, to me, from them. I don't think it's just about one. It's not one sided.
Sure. I think that's
Yeah,
the distinction. Not everyone's always familiar with the distinction between coaching and mentoring, and are they one and the same? And of course, they're not the same. My understanding, and I'm happy to be challenged, but certainly from the qualifications and search that I did back in the day, coaching is where if someone came to you and they said, and I've delivered this project, and you would coach them back through questions without giving any guidance. You say, well, how do you think it went? Well, I think it went okay. And things that we know. And what do you think you could have done differently? Okay, well, why don't you go and try that? And what do you think went really well and what didn't? And you coach through questions, and the coachee will come up with the responses themselves. Whereas mentoring, it's a similar process, but of course you work in payroll as a payroll leader. So you have the opportunity to give them guidance as well. You still ask the same questions, but you've often tried the things before they have. You know what works and what doesn't always work, and you'll have more insightful questions you can kind of put their way. And that's often the difference. So you can have I could coach you, you could coach me, even if we did completely different careers. But mentoring, usually you're in the same kind of discipline, aren't you? Because you've been there before and you can really help them on a journey. I think that's really, really interesting. It's why it's so powerful in payroll. We need more mentors in payroll that can help the next generation of leaders to come through as well. Have there been any real mentorship moments that you'll never forget, that have really, you mentioned you sometimes get giddy when it really, really sparks for you. So any moments you can share?
Yeah. Personally, the mentorship that I received was giving me the opportunities to challenge myself, because they believe in me, and they make it very obvious and verbal to express that to me. And that mentorship guided me to push myself and to strive for more and to ask more questions. There's never a silly question. That's for sure. Some people are like, oh, I'm not going to ask that. And so one thing that I tell my team multiple times throughout employment is, please do not think that you cannot come to me for a silly question, because it can be so much bigger issue that you're not aware of. And that mentorship of guiding them through the thought process and the big picture. And yes, it can be coaching, but it's also part of the mentoring aspect of making sure I am providing them the tools and the insight to be successful. Just making sure that I truly address anything that I see, facial expressions, right? They don't even have to say something, where I stop and, I ask them, how can I help you? How can we make this better together? And then let them go on their own based off that mentorship, the coaching, and then that confidence that you want to instill in them. Not only, on payroll, but on communication, verbally and written. I had someone recently on my team come to me and say, you write so well. You get your point across, and it's not 4 paragraphs, right? There's it depends on your audience of how you write, how you communicate, written, and you don't have the opportunity to speak to them in person. And so I'm also mentoring on that, just the things that, come over time. You practice, you read articles, you're getting mentored by other leadership you've had in the past of how to approach things. And that's what I really took to heart. And when I was asked that, I was like, this is so awesome. This is exactly what I'm looking for, is how can I mentor that person to be that interested and that wants to be on the next level.
Yeah.
It's really truly the relationships you build. I have had so many opportunities to build some amazing relationships throughout my career. And we are still, they call me when they have a question. Hey, am I looking at this right? Am I doing it this right? Doesn't matter if it was 10 years ago when they worked with me. They still call me, or we're so close. We hang out on holidays. It's, and I have, it just feels like a team outside of a team. And, I look forward to any other day, any other opportunity that I have to work with them again, because it just makes it more fun.
I say when you enjoy your work, you never work a day in your life, right? And I can tell that your team clearly know they've got you in their corner, which is really, really important. I love the opening where you said there's no such thing as a silly question. The silly thing, of course, is not to ask, because then you end up with your head down, probably going in the wrong direction. So always ask the question. There's an acronym which you might like. You may have heard it before, but if our listeners are listening, they might find it useful. We often think of words like failure or fail as a negative word, but there's a great acronym. Fail is your first attempt in learning. So, that's how we learn. It's how we grow. We grow by making mistakes. And, if we approach it that way, never be afraid to fail. Just recognize it's your first attempt in learning. Because when you fail, you'll understand why you failed. You can ask yourself the questions to go, next time I'll do it this way, or I'll try this and see if that works better. And that's how we progress, how we evolve. And that's how actually you become a great mentor later, because you've made the mistakes and you can help prevent those from making the same ones. You mentioned right at the end of that response that you've built some really great relationships that have stood the test of time. They still contact you 10 years later. I want to go back a little bit to the global relationship piece, because it's not just teams we need to build relationships with when we're in payroll. We also have to build really strong relationships with stakeholders across borders. So tell me a little bit about how you've managed to do that.
I've worked with even big 5 firms. I've worked with, different levels on the global aspect. And, the way to approach it is, listen and then ask questions and collaborate as a team. I'm not going in knowing, oh, I know everything. No, you don't. But you learn, and that builds those relationships. And not only between myself and an individual or a team, but both teams that are domestic and teams that are international. They aren't separate. They're one team. And I make sure that we collaborate as a team, because we all have the same goal, and we can learn and develop from each other. And that includes me. I always make sure that everybody realizes I don't know everything, and I am interested in their insight, because they're the ones that are doing it day to day. They have that experience that I wouldn't necessarily have, but I've had it in the past, or I definitely know how to approach things that I have not had experience with before, or, it just hasn't been something that I've dealt with. And I just really, that's how I really approach it. It's not even just your team. It's the company, it's senior leadership, it's third parties, it's accounting firms for audits, and, all those fun things. And so that's how I approach global as well. I don't necessarily see it as a separate. I see it as this is the team, and everybody, it's very important that they collaborate as a team, with or without me. And so I build that going in, and it takes time. Nothing happens overnight.
So we're back to those 3 core words: the trust, collaborate, and encourage. And I know that, I get the sense that not very much phases you. I'd be interested to know what does, where you've ever been frightened yourself and you've had to kind of step into it. It sounds like you just go for it. I know, believe it or not, listeners, this is Wendy's first podcast. I feel like you come across like you've done 100 of these, honestly. So what's next in the world of Wendy Uutala? Is it, you've hinted the next chapter is going to be more in mentoring and public speaking. Are there any particular topics or audiences or even missions that really excite you most, where you want to really expand your impact?
I definitely want to mentor on a larger scale. Whether it's an audience that I'm speaking in front of, or a podcast like this, I want to make sure that I give opportunities and learn from a larger scale. Yeah, I've done a couple of speaking throughout my career, but only in person. And one of the biggest goals I have is speaking for the payroll org. There is a lot to do, and with a full-time job and, responsibilities personally, I've not had the opportunity to have that request to even do so. I mean, obviously you've done it, and there's a lot that is preparational and making sure that it's approved that you can even speak of it. When you're speaking on behalf of an organization that impacts their credibility and making sure that people even attend. Right. I mean, you want to make sure you have a great topic and that you make it fun. And a lot of people don't think payroll is fun, but it is so much fun. I mean, a lot of people just go in, they don't even have payroll experience, or they have a degree in a totally different field. And guess what? They fell into payroll somehow. Yeah. And they fell in love with it. And it comes with not only the functions of payroll and what interests you and what you enjoy, what you're good at. I like math, you have all of those things that people have ideas of why they're there, but I help develop them even more of this is why you're here. And it's not just one thing. There's so many aspects. If you don't want to process payroll, okay, you want to process tax, you want to do accounting, you want to do workers' comp, like it's benefits. I've managed benefits before. So, it's just making it exciting for everybody. And that's how I approach it.
I think your passion will come through whatever you just talk about. I could come up with 100 titles for you to submit to Payroll Org: in the heart of payroll leadership, how to take your team with you, the power of mentorship. And there's so many titles. I think you'd be an excellent speaker on any of those kinds of topics. So if you need any help, give me a shout. I'll help draft it. But I think you deserve a spot on the stage to help others, because it's a really important topic. And one of the hardest things in payroll, most people are elevated to directors of payroll or heads of payroll, whatever it might be, because they're great at payroll. And no one's really necessarily given them the time to teach them how to be a great leader. And sometimes great knowledge doesn't always transpire to great leadership. That it can do, but you need to have that mentorship or that coaching gap to help bridge it. And I think a lot of people I speak to, that's why they have imposter syndrome. It's why they struggle, because they think, I know payroll inside and out, but now I'm leading a team of 20 and I've never done that before. Like, what makes a great leader? And I think we need more commentary on this. We need more people talking about the kind of skills, the qualities, the things that have worked successfully as they have for you. And for you, obviously, trust, collaboration, encouragement, 3 central principles to the way that you lead, mentorship being in there as well. I think they're really good takeaways for people to have for listening to this show, to go, okay, how do I build trust in my teams? How do I encourage my teams? How do I collaborate with my teams? If that's all they take away from this episode, we've already achieved a phenomenal amount. So I think, we can craft a good talk for you. Well, we're going to open the vault in just a minute, but let me ask one more question, and we're going to dig into your payroll wisdom. If you could go back then and give a younger you one piece of advice based on everything you know now, what would it be?
It would be, don't have fear. Don't be scared to approach something that you've never touched before. Go in with a positive attitude. I believe in positive 100%. If you have any negative thoughts, or, you don't go in to it with an open mind, you're not going to be successful in the end. So, I had that a little bit, not going to lie, right? Early on, not sure, just everybody has it, whether, to me anyway, I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of myself and others that I've had conversations with. It's just really getting past that fear, trusting in yourself, believing in yourself. Tell yourself you can do it. I got this, and just run with it, and that's what you build off, and that's what builds your confidence, and what brings your leadership, because you had the leadership to trust in you.
Interesting. While we're on the subject of fear, I'm a big believer that courage is cultivated. We get more courageous the more we expose ourselves to having to be courageous. And if we never do anything that scares us, we can't be surprised later on in life if we're fearful of everything. So if you can start that journey earlier by cultivating that courage, by doing the things that frighten us, because they align with our values, because we know it's part of where we want to get to, then we need to start challenging ourselves, because you can cultivate it, you can grow it, and you can become almost a fearless leader later on. But you've got to start working that earlier. We can't become brave if we never have opportunity to be brave. And I think that's really good advice you've given. I also like the attitude piece. One of my favorite quotes that I try and read to myself every day is your mood does not dictate your day. Your day does not dictate your mood dictates your day. Get it all the way around. We've got to wake up and we can make the day whatever we want it to be if we have the right mindset. But let's open the payroll vault. I've reimagined this a little bit just for you, Wendy. So what's one piece of advice you would give to someone working in payroll today? It's not necessarily a younger you, but someone who's already experienced, already working in the profession.
I would say to ask them a question of, what do you feel you're missing? What do you want in your life that you haven't approached yet? And it could be something other than payroll, but it leads into your entire life and approach in it. And that's really, whether you're seasoned or not seasoned, it actually goes for both. But many seasoned payroll professionals feel like, oh, I've already done that, or I've already reached where I want to be, because they don't give themselves the opportunity to open their mind a little bit more of, it's not just that. No one's perfect. And what do you feel? Or are you listening to feedback from others? They might not necessarily say it up front, but they say keywords, body language. You should pick up on those things, because you need to reflect on that and be like, what did I say? Or what did I not say? And how can I improve on that?
It's a great question. Okay. Number 2, if you could change one thing about the payroll industry overnight, what would it be?
For companies not to think that payroll is overhead and doesn't have the capabilities of being on our own. One thing that, I hope to look for in the future, and larger companies, international, domestic, what have you, are giving those opportunities for a chief of payroll, or, just a totally different level, separated from HR and finance. They've never really found a place for payroll, and payroll should have its own place. And that's where I eventually hope that companies will go and evaluate their current setup, because if they have the trust in the individual that's running the payroll and they have no idea what they're doing, why is it under HR or payroll, HR or finance, that kind of thing. I think it's just really interesting, especially, going through COVID, going through all those experiences where, payroll was never really talked about before. And all of a sudden, payroll was the most important. I wish that companies still looked at it that way and not reverted back to being comfortable in the normal structure that has been around forever. I agree. That it's just the vision of payroll being separated from all other departments, because we are totally different and we know and touch all of them. So it's just giving us the exposure that payroll deserves. We work crazy hours. We work holidays. We make sure we do whatever it happens. And it takes a special person for that, and a special team for that. And just giving that visibility to the company and leadership for, hopefully they make the right decisions in the future for the structure of the company.
Yeah. I mean, look, the COVID, obviously, I'm a big believer there's positives in every negative situation. Obviously, COVID was a massive situation, and it was damaging and difficult for many, many people. But on the other side of it, payroll was respected more. In the UK, payroll workers were considered key workers. You know, it was thrust into the limelight. There was one show still talking about payroll in COVID. The Payroll podcast was launched in 2018, so we went through it. But there weren't many voices trying to elevate the profession. There's loads out there now, of course, and it's really good. It's really exciting to see. But on the back of what was a terrible situation, actually, people have really started to understand the importance payroll has within business. And as you quite rightly said, it's the only function I can think of really that touches every single employee, every single pay cycle without fail.
Correct.
No other department I can think of really does that. Every employee, every single one, it touches every single pay cycle. So it's incredibly important. So my last question, a slightly different one. So if you prepared yourself for the vault, my apologies, because this has not been asked before. But if payroll was a person, how would you describe your relationship with it?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a good one. I would say that I would approach the relationship as cohesive, making sure that, again, positive attitude going into it. Payroll is challenging. You're going to have complex situations. You're going to have to constantly pivot. And that's how I would compare my life to payroll. If I was payroll, all of those aspects, probably thousands of more, based off people's experience from one to another. It really embodies who you are. And, it drives the same. You drive yourself, you drive payroll drives you, payroll impacts everyone. That's, I feel like I am payroll. I've been doing it. So.
Cohesive work for me. Cohesive work, I get it. Yeah, you're fully entwined with the world of payroll, and it's part of you, and it's been a big part of your journey and your story. And I'm so glad we've had an opportunity to share your experience and your wisdom, your guidance for other leaders that are trying to get to grips with how to be a great leader in the modern world of work. And it very much is, in my opinion, around establishing great coaching cultures, mentoring cultures, where people feel unmuted, people feel listened to, supported. Command and control is a leadership style of the past. We need to throw it away and really introduce and welcome in this collaborative, encouraging, positive, trusting cultures of the future, because I think that's what will take payroll departments beyond where we even know where we can take it to. And I think it also plays to our strengths of employee experience now, which is very much entrenched in the world of payroll. It wasn't before. But, if we're really going to build on employee experience, we need to be able to trust our people and our employees and all the things around it as well. So last question, I'm going to ask this because I think it's a nice place to leave the show today, Wendy. It's been a really fantastic conversation. But what legacy do you hope to leave for the next generation of payroll professionals?
I would say that they just need sometimes jump in, if they don't have the opportunity to get the education. I started so young. Give it a chance. You don't know if you've never tried it. People go into their fields of interest. They go to college, they get all their degrees, and then they end up in payroll. And it's because there are so many opportunities and growth and level, and you can pretty much go anywhere you want with it. And so I would tell someone that is a beginner and trying to figure out what they're going to do, whatever age they are, is, because before, granted, payroll really wasn't something that people were like, yeah, I want to do payroll for a living. There wasn't education for it. Other than,
so that the legacy you want. The legacy you want to leave then is to show people that this is a career where no matter what you've got in your qualifications, no matter who you are, this is a great profession. And look what it's done for me. It can do the same for you. Embrace it, come into it, be welcoming, choose payroll, right? Maybe that's a great legacy to leave.
I'm like, what other option is there now? People look at it that way.
I love that.
Young people might be scared. Young people might be scared. People, don't necessarily listen or feel confident in hiring someone young for a payroll position that doesn't matter what you do. It's all serious. And, I think that leadership needs to give people that are younger coming in those opportunities, for one, because sometimes they just don't even have the opportunities. But I think that companies are expanding their considerations because the younger, people in the world, they're looking for that. They're looking for a company that will invest in them and trust in them. And then hopefully they have that leadership to grow and develop into whatever they want. And
well, who knows? But with your public speaking and this podcast and the things we're doing, maybe they'll listen to this, and the legacy could also be helping the leaders of tomorrow to know how to build an empathetic, encouraging, inspiring, trusting, collaborative culture so they can become great leaders in the future. Wendy Uutala, it's been a fascinating story into leadership. I think your heart really shines through. You've given this profession everything. Hopefully it sounds like it's giving you loads back in return. I hope our listeners have been inspired by your story, certainly your lessons for what makes a great leader across multi-state payroll, across multicultural payroll, global payroll. Of course, if you want to connect with Wendy, I will put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, so do check that out. You can get that straight away through. And if you do need support hiring exceptional payroll talent, you can reach out to my team at JJ Recruitment. There'll also be a link to that in the show notes as well. Today, you've been listening to Wendy Uutala, and I've been your host. My name is Nick Day. I look forward to being the next episode of the Payroll Podcast real soon. Wendy, thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Deal is the global payroll platform built for complexity. From payslips to benefits to compliance in over 150 countries. Deal centralizes everything in one secure workflow with real-time visibility across your entire workforce. No fragmented systems, no chasing local vendors, just accurate, compliant pay delivered on time, every time. See why more than 35,000 businesses trust Deal. Visit DEEL.com/NickDay to book your demo. That's DEEL.com/NickDay.